You have probably heard the word autophagy more times in the past few years than in the rest of your life combined. Since the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine was awarded in 2016 for the discovery of its mechanisms, autophagy has become one of the most discussed concepts in the wellness world. The idea is compelling: your own cells can clean house, breaking down worn-out components, recycling them, and emerging more efficient and resilient. Fasting is the most accessible way to activate this process, and that has inspired a generation of health-conscious people to take their fasting windows seriously. And inside those fasting windows, a growing number of people are reaching for propolis, the resinous substance produced by honeybees, hoping to combine its antioxidant and antimicrobial power with the cellular cleanup benefits of fasting. It sounds like an excellent pairing. But today we need to talk about what actually happens to your stomach lining when you do this, because the science tells a more complicated story than most people expect. Let us start by building a precise understanding of autophagy. The word comes from Greek, meaning self-eating. In every one of your cells, structures are constantly being built, used, and worn down. Mitochondria lose efficiency, misfolded proteins accumulate, damaged organelles pile up. Autophagy is the cellular process that identifies these dysfunctional components, wraps them in a membrane structure called an autophagosome, delivers them to the cell's recycling machinery, and breaks them down into raw materials for new structures. When autophagy works well, cellular function is maintained. The accumulation of damaged material is kept in check, and there is growing evidence linking robust autophagy activity to healthier aging outcomes. The key regulatory players are two enzymes. mTOR acts as the growth and abundance signal. When nutrition is plentiful and insulin is elevated, mTOR stays active and autophagy is suppressed. The opposing signal comes from AMPK, which activates when cellular energy falls and nutrients become scarce. When AMPK rises, mTOR is inhibited and autophagy is unlocked. Research suggests this transition begins somewhere around 12 hours into a fast, with activation increasing meaningfully beyond 16 to 24 hours, though the exact timing varies between individuals, based on metabolic rate, prior meals, physical activity, and other factors. Now here is the question that shapes everything that follows. When you are in a fasting state, and you take a supplement, what happens? Many people operate on the reasonable-sounding assumption that, as long as something contains no calories and does not spike insulin, it does not interfere with fasting or autophagy. Propolis seems to fit that description. It contains negligible calories, does not trigger a meaningful glucose or insulin response, and is derived from natural plant resins. So far, so logical. But this reasoning has a significant gap, and that gap is the state of your stomach lining during a prolonged fast. Understanding the fasting stomach environment is the key to everything that follows. There is a widespread misconception that an empty stomach is a quiet stomach. The opposite is true. Your stomach continuously secretes what is called basal acid, a steady baseline production of hydrochloric acid from the parietal cells of the stomach wall, regardless of whether food is present. During a meal, food dilutes and buffers this acid. The physical bulk of food protects the mucosa. Gastric emptying distributes the acid load throughout the digestive process. In a fasted state, none of these buffers are present. The acid simply accumulates. The pH inside a fasted human stomach typically falls between 1.5 and 3.5. For context, battery acid has a pH of around 1. The fasting stomach is among the most aggressively acidic environments in the human body. Your stomach protects itself from this acid through a layered defense system. A thick mucus layer secreted by goblet cells coats the stomach lining, physically preventing acid from reaching the epithelial cells beneath. Bicarbonate secreted at the mucosal surface provides local neutralization. Prostaglandins stimulate mucus production, maintain blood flow to the mucosa, and support continuous cellular repair. This defense system is robust under normal conditions, but it is not impervious, and it is most vulnerable when the fast has been long, when the mucosa is already compromised by infection, inflammation, or medication, and when something is introduced directly. into this acidic, food-free environment that challenges the protective layer. This is exactly where propolis enters the picture, and where the three mechanisms of gastric irritation come into play. The first mechanism is direct mucosal disruption from the ethanol base. The vast majority of propolis products sold commercially are ethanol extracts, meaning the active compounds have been drawn out of raw propolis, using alcohol as the solvent. This method is used because the key bioactive molecules in propolis, particularly the flavonoids and the compound called caffeic acid phenethyl ester, or CAPE, are fat-soluble and do not dissolve meaningfully in water. Ethanol extracts these compounds efficiently. The ethanol content in commercial propolis preparations can range from 30% to over 90%, depending on the product and concentration. While the dose volume is typically small, measured in drops, the concentration matters enormously. When there is no food in the stomach to dilute it, ethanol has a well-documented capacity to directly dissolve the mucus layer that protects the stomach wall. When food is present, incoming ethanol is diluted across the stomach contents, and the mucosa is already buffered and protected. When the stomach is empty and fasted, the concentrated ethanol contacts the mucosa directly, thinning or disrupting the mucus layer, and exposing the epithelial cells beneath to the already highly acidic gastric contents. This is not a theoretical concern. It reflects the same mechanism by which alcohol on an empty stomach causes more pronounced gastric irritation than alcohol consumed with food, a phenomenon most people have experienced firsthand. The second mechanism involves CAPE and its effect on gastric acid secretion. This is the most pharmacologically specific piece of the story. Research published in the European Journal of Pharmacology investigated the effect of CAPE on gastric acid secretion in an isolated stomach model. The findings revealed that CAPE inhibits the activity of acetylcholinesterase, the enzyme responsible for breaking down the neurotransmitter acetylcholine. When acetylcholinesterase is inhibited, acetylcholine remains active longer. Acetylcholine is one of the primary stimulants of acid secretion from the parietal cells of the stomach wall. The consequence of this pathway is that CAPE can amplify gastric acid secretion, triggered by cholinergic stimulation. Under fed conditions, this additional acid enters a stomach already filled with buffering food content, and the effect is largely absorbed without consequence. Under fasted conditions, the stomach is already highly acidic. There is no buffering material present, and stimulating further acid output adds to a mucosal environment that is already near its peak acidity. For individuals with healthy and intact gastric mucosa, this may be manageable. For those with pre-existing gastritis, gastric ulcers, GERD, or Helicobacter pylori infection, the additional acid stimulus can translate directly into symptom aggravation or mucosal damage progression. The third mechanism concerns the direct contact between concentrated polyphenols and the stomach lining in the absence of food. The flavonoids in propolis, including chrysin, galangin, quercetin, and camphorol, are potent antioxidant and anti-inflammatory molecules. When taken with food, these compounds are mixed into the stomach contents, and their contact with any specific area of the mucosa is diluted and transient. When taken in a fasted state, the undiluted extract contacts the gastric mucosa at a localized concentration that can be irritating to epithelial tissue. This is a dose and concentration dependent phenomenon, and the degree of irritation varies with the strength of the product, individual mucosal sensitivity, and the duration of the fast. At this point, a reasonable question arises. If propolis has gastroprotective properties, which the research literature does support, how can the same substance also cause gastric irritation? The answer lies entirely in context and conditions. The gastroprotective studies on propolis almost universally examine its effects on already damaged gastric mucosa, using models of ulcer induction, NSAID-induced injury, or stress-induced lesions. In these contexts, propolis compounds help reduce inflammation, support mucosal healing, and limit oxidative damage to injured tissue. The conditions are fundamentally different from a healthy person taking a high-concentration ethanol extract of propolis into an empty, fasted stomach over an extended period. The capacity of propolis to support healing in damaged tissue does not cancel out its capacity to irritate healthy tissue when delivered in the wrong form, at the wrong concentration, at the wrong time. Regarding the interaction between propolis and autophagy specifically, the current evidence does not clearly establish that the small caloric content of propolis significantly disrupts fasting-induced autophagy through mTOR reactivation. The insulin response is negligible. Interestingly, some research suggests that CAPE may actually activate AMPK, the same signaling pathway that promotes autophagy. This means that certain components of propolis might theoretically align with rather than oppose autophagy signaling. However, this area of research is still developing, and clinical data in humans are limited. What can be said with considerably more confidence is that the gastric effects of propolis on an empty stomach are a real and documented concern, particularly for individuals with any degree of mucosal vulnerability. So what does a practical approach to propolis supplementation actually look like? The most straightforward recommendation is to take propolis with, or shortly after a meal. Food creates the buffering and diluting environment that reduces ethanol-mediated mucosal contact, limits the physiological impact of CAPE-associated acid stimulation, and prevents the concentrated polyphenol bolus from sitting directly against the stomach lining. If you are fasting for autophagy purposes, the sensible approach is to keep the fasting window free of propolis and take it at your first meal of the day when the fast ends. This preserves your fasting-induced autophagy signal and allows you to benefit from propolis under conditions that are far less likely to cause gastric distress. Choosing a water-based propolis extract or an encapsulated form, rather than a high-ethanol liquid extract, also reduces the mucosal irritation risk considerably, though it is worth noting that the concentration of fat-soluble bioactives, like flavonoids and CAPE, is generally lower in water-based preparations. Diluting your propolis drops in a full glass of water or juice before taking them further reduces the concentration of alcohol and polyphenols that makes direct contact with the stomach mucosa. Anyone with diagnosed gastritis, peptic ulcer disease, GERD, or Helicobacter pylori infection should consult a gastroenterologist before adding propolis to their routine, regardless of timing, since even well-timed supplementation may be inadvisable. Depending on the severity of the condition, those taking anticoagulant medications, blood sugar medications, or certain antibiotics should also consult their physician before starting propolis, as some of its components can influence drug metabolizing enzymes. A practical starting point for the week ahead looks like this. On day 1, check the ethanol content listed on your propolis product and review the recommended serving size. On day 2, shift your propolis dose to immediately after your first meal, following your fast rather than during the fasting window. On day 3, dilute your drops in at least 100 milliliters of water before taking them and note whether gastric comfort improves. On day 4, spend your fasting window focused purely on water, plain tea, or black coffee, and observe how your stomach feels without propolis during that period. On day 5, take propolis with an evening meal, and monitor your digestive response through the evening. On day 6, if you have access to a water-extracted or encapsulated propolis product, compare the gastric response to your ethanol extract. On day 7, if any degree of upper abdominal discomfort, burning, or nausea has been persisting, book an appointment with a gastroenterologist. Rather than continuing to self-manage, your stomach lining is a remarkably resilient structure, but it works best when we understand the conditions it needs to do its job. Fasting is a powerful health practice. Propolis is a genuinely bioactive natural compound, with meaningful research support behind it. The issue is not either one of them in isolation. It is the combination of a prolonged fasted, highly acidic stomach and a high-concentration ethanol extract, arriving with nothing to buffer it. That combination puts unnecessary stress on the very tissue that supports your broader digestive health. Keep the fast clean, and let propolis do its work in a fed stomach, where it can be absorbed efficiently and without irritating the lining. It has the potential to protect. If this video helped clarify something you had been wondering about, please share it. Subscribe, and leave a comment below with your experience or any questions you have. More evidence-based health content is coming your way.